Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Connaughton, I want to talk to you about streamlining. But before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to Director Zeldin for the good work that he is doing to find the fraud, waste, and abuse in these slush funds that have gone to fund NGOs and other organizations. And I appreciate your answer there previously, on the fact that, no, we can still fund brownfield projects and look to more efficiently operate our government. And that's something that we're focused on. So in your testimony, you talked about approve, build, and comply, which I think offers a pretty intriguing solution. Can you expand on that concept and talk about the streamlining of permitting and other issues that will help us with this topic that we're talking about today?
Yeah, yes, Congressman. The concept is actually very well practiced, but in a small scale, under the banner of permit by rule. There are lots of examples where Congress has looked at a very specific issue and legislatively approved, the activity to go forward, while still requiring compliance. Again, maybe a controversial area, but the border wall is an example of that. Bipartisan legislation in 2006 provided for that, and it allows the Secretary of Homeland Security to certify construction and to waive permitting. Again, not compliance, but waive permitting. And each administration, President Obama, President Trump, and then President Biden, each of their Homeland Security directors used that authority. Recently, you had the Congress, for the sake of, I think, one semiconductor plant, and it was critical, legislatively waiving NEPA. Okay, now the plant is still complying with all the environmental laws. It's still subject to all that permitting. It's not subject to 5 years of waiting around for the environmental review to get done. They're just getting on with compliance. So that's happened in Congress. And at the administrative level, at the federal and state level, including in your state, and we have the Congressman from Pennsylvania, there's actually well-established procedures for automatic permitting, okay? And by Texas is the king of the states when it comes to that. And things move, investments happen.
Well, thank you. I may come back to you on the state and local coordination there. I want to go to Mr. Miller. When it comes to rural issues, obviously this is important to me. I represent a very rural district, but one that has a tremendous amount of energy, one that could benefit very, very greatly. But we see, more of an urge to show to do urban projects rather than rural. So maybe talk to me a little bit about some of the barriers that have impacted us on the rural community.
I'm a big believer in our rural areas. We have kind of view them as a blank canvas, and a lot of people, at least in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in more urban areas, because of urban sprawl and, for instance, data centers and construction of them taking up a property that could be used for other things that those people think would be of more benefit. I think it's an amazing opportunity for rural areas for recruitment of data centers and to bring them to those rural areas. A lot of data centers prefer to be in an area that's kind of away, especially when you're talking about Department of Defense and in more sensitive type data centers. So I really think a concise effort should be put on the recruitment of data centers to rural areas. And even, through this brownfield funding, maybe a set aside for data centers, preferably for rural data centers, but especially for rural or for data center type projects. I think that's the future. I mean, I think we all know that, and we have to have the power generation for those data centers, which again, brownfields present an excellent opportunity for that, especially in rural areas.
So whether rural or urban, these projects are beneficial. They help us in a number of ways, but specifically on the rural areas, can you talk to us about maybe some of the challenges they face when it comes to not being able to match funds because we have small communities, or how do they overcome that?
Well, and that's one of the items I mentioned, of course, with the EPA Brownfield Fund specifically. We talked about more funding from a grant standpoint for redevelopment. Not necessarily, I think they do a wonderful job with the assessment, though I love this approve, build, comply method that's being discussed. But we just need to figure out a way to, we can utilize matching funds, but we need redevelopment funds from EPA. In rural areas, we're really good to have a certain pot of money, especially state money for some of this development. But you have to have those matching funds. So again, I mentioned it in my opening remarks, if we could create something maybe that, with some of this brownfield funding for rural areas, and it can even have a match requirement to that. I think everybody's fine with that because we can stack. That's what we all do, I think. It's what everybody does to make projects work, especially at the cost we're looking at for these type of projects.
Thank you. My time's expired. Yield back.